Okay, we're recording.
Today we're talking with Othella Millican Watts, who is a longtime Cove resident, and she will share some memories from growing up in Cedar Grove. Yeah. When did your family first settle here in the Cove?
Oh Lordy, I should have done more research, I guess.
No, that's okay.
No, my great granddaddy, I guess. I mean, and that was back in the 1800s, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And they're buried, all are buried at Antioch and Cedar Grove cemeteries. My granddaddy, Thomas Jefferson Millican, was born in Dirt Town in Chattooga County. I don't really know where that is, but I mean, I know where Chattooga County is, but I don't know where Dirt Town is. And he, in the history, Walker County history, it says that he was an orphan at, I think, 9 years old, and he came here with his grandfather to Walker County, whose name was, I'll tell you his name was in a minute, William Clayhorn. But that was actually his uncle. It wasn't his grandfather. My granddaddy's dad was Robert Millican, and he was, let me get this just a minute. Jeanette is an offspring of this Jeanette Watson, Nettie Mae. They had the same, he had the same dad, but a different mother than my granddaddy did, their granddaddy did. Let me get my notes.
Okay.
It's impressive that you have notes.
Yeah, I want to see those notes.
Yeah.
Andrew Jackson Millican was my second great grandfather, and his children, this William Cleghorn Millican was one of his children, and Robert Millican was. So in the history it says that the Cleghorn Millican was his grandfather, but it actually was his uncle. So then from the Robert Millican was, his wife was Elizabeth Johnson, and he was my Thomas Jefferson Millican's dad. And then, let's say, evidently, the one he was married to first, the Melinda Powell, he was married to first, and she was the one, that they were the ones that had the James Madison Millican Sr., and then his son was James Madison Jr., and he is the father of Gus Millican, Gus and Miss Lizzie Millican. Lizzie was his wife, but he then is the father of Bob Millican and Nettie Mae Hobbs and Ethel Merritt. And then, of course, from all of them, is offshoots of the rest of the Millicans. Somewhere I had added up how many grandchildren that they had. That's a rundown picture of the old home place, but and that's a picture of my grandmother and granddaddy.
So start with your granddaddy and tell us about those boys that you...
Did you know that I didn't know my granddaddy. I did my grandmother. I was 4 years old when she died. So, but my dad was the last one of the 6 boys. My dad was the last one to leave home. He stayed and took care of my grandmother. And I can remember my grandmother staying with us some. But my granddaddy died in, let's see, when he died. I believe it was in 1919 was when he died. But anyway, I really didn't know him. And the interesting thing about it, I told you that in the history it said that he came to live with, but I've got his death certificate right here, and it says, and Uncle Booze, or his name is James, but everybody called him Booze, he signed it, and it says, name of father, Millican. And it says, mother's name, don't know. And that was the son, you know, and I can't, you know, I don't know, I just, let me let you look at it. And that's his obituary, I think, or it was in the map. And when my grandmother died, she actually came from Cumming, Georgia. I mean, that's where her parents lived. But this was, and I'm not really sure. I think maybe Millican or somebody wrote this out, and this is her funeral.
Oh.
She was, Miss Mamie Shankles played Death is Only a Dream and God Will Take Care of You, and Farther Along, and When They Ring Those Golden Bells, and Kermit Howard's wife sang at my grandmother's funeral. And it's got the scripture, and of course she's buried at Antioch. And but anyway, and then my dad was in the First World War, and he got injured, and here's a telegram to my grandmother, and it's dated 3/6/1919, and it says, Ms. Mary L. Millican, Kensington, Georgia, Private Fred Millican, infantry, previously reported missing in action, October the 14th, now reported wounded in right arm about October. So he got a minor wound in the arm, but anyway, he drew a little pension from that. And my grandmother's dad was A.T. Leslie, Alvin Leslie, and he was a Confederate soldier. But here's a thing that I found on there on whatever. It says he was court-martialed, but it says down here, reason not stated. So, but he owned a store somewhere, and all we can figure out is that I've always heard that the store burned and he burned up in it, but I'm not really sure. I can't find it. I can't back that up. But anyway, all right, ask me another question.
Well, tell us about your uncles, your dad's brothers.
Okay, there was there was two. My grandparents had two babies that died young, like 5 and 6 years old, back during the time that, I don't know if it was typhoid fever, I don't know what it was, but anyway, then after that, they had 6 boys. They had Homer, was the oldest, and the two that died was Frances Della Millican, and she was born in 1876 and died in 1882. And the boy was Ira Oliver Millican, and he was born in 1879 and died in 1882. Then they had Robert Homer, and he married Maggie, was his wife's name, but they always lived in Chickamauga. But he was a father of Lillian, who married Demery Bell. And of course, Lillian lived here too, so she's one of the ones that. And then Freeman was the next one. He was born in 1883, and he had, I think he had 5 kids, and TJ and Ruth and Ruby and Leland and Thelma were his children, and they all lived here. They all lived in the community. And then Bert was the next one. He was born in 1885, and he lived in St. Elmo. He had 2 children, but they lived in St. Elmo too. And then Uncle Booze, his name was James Alvin. I don't know why they called him Booze. I mean, nobody could ever tell me why he was called Booze. But anyway,
that family likes nicknames with the doodle bug.
1889, and then of course Daddy, and there's 3 of us, and then Uncle Doc, and he had Burla, Tom, and Eveline. Now, Eveline is still living. Eveline and me and Talmadge are the only one out of like 21 grandchildren that are still living. And Eveline is like 91 years old. And Talmadge is about to turn 88, and I'm about to turn 86. But anyway.
Where does Eveline live? Where does Eveline live?
She lives with her daughter, and I believe Fort Oglethorpe now. And let's see what else we know about us.
That's super interesting, because anybody that lives down here knows somebody with the last name Milligan, and they don't realize that they know a ton of other people who had the Milligan name before marriage.
Well, when everybody, all the kids and grandkids married, just about everybody, I'd say up until just really kind of in the last 10 years, when we knew everybody. We could sit on our front porch, and if somebody had company, we knew it. I mean, we'd say, and when we were growing up, on Jenny's Lane, Chester Shankles lived in the house right at the end. And then Mr. Merritt lived in where all of your stuff is there. And then the Everetts, Jenny's grandparents, and Mom and Dad lived over there. And then on back of that next house, Pat Tucker lived. And the thing I remember about Pat Tucker, we were taking a census for some reason from Antioch Baptist Church, and me and a girl by the name of Lucille Geary had that. And when we got to Pat Tucker, he would not tell us anything. He said, "You can't make me tell you how old I am," and said even the president couldn't make me tell him. So anyway, but they were nice people. He just, he didn't like to give out much information. But Jenny's mom really taught me to sew. We we didn't have, nobody up here had had a lot of money. I mean, you know, we didn't know we were poor because everybody was just alike, you know. I mean, didn't anybody up here have any money? I don't guess they did very many other places either, but anyway, we would buy, Mom and Daddy would buy flour in printed sacks, you know, and they would try to get sacks that matched, you know, the same material. And then I would take a couple of sacks and make me a skirt out of, you know, and I'd take it over to Jenny's mom, and she would help me make me a new skirt. And I was, you know, we'd really think we were something if we had knew something new to wear, you know. But we didn't get electricity up here until, I think I was like a freshman in high school when we finally got electricity. And the roads were not paved. I don't know, I think I was married before they paved the road from Trickle on up here. Brother Durrance was the pastor at I remember him at Antioch. And they got a church bus. It was really I think a bread truck or something that they had painted or whatever. And so he was going to teach Talmadge to drive. I mean, he was wanting Talmadge to drive that church bus. Well, Talmadge was just a kid. He didn't even have a driver's license. And they had just graded the road up here. And you don't know about graded roads, but when they would grade them, they would grade up big rocks, you know, that would be on the side of the road. Well, he put Talmadge in that van thing, truck, and it went out toward the Cove. And of course, he ran over every big rock that was in because he didn't know, you know. But he learned to drive it, and he drove that church bus for several years when we went to church. The first person that ever picked up people up in the Cove to ride to church, Demery Bell had bought a truck from Chattanooga Paper. He worked at Chattanooga Paper and Woodenware on Main Street, and it was a van body. I mean, it was a big truck. In fact, to get up in it, you had to have a ladder, you know, but they used, Millican, I think, would actually drive that and pick up people up and down the road through here and carry them to church. But when of course, I went to Cedar Grove Consolidated School, but I was the first, my class was the first one that when they closed the school, that was in the 9th grade, and that was the year they added the 12th grade, and we went to Chattanooga Valley. They transferred us to Chattanooga Valley, and I was a freshman, and people made fun of us. We were from the country, you know. I mean, they would kid us about being from the country, and now they all want to live up here for some reason.
That's true. That is so true. Yeah. So that was my next question. You did great on that one without being asked. What did your parents do to support the family? What was
Do what?
To support the family? What did your mom and dad or?
Well, like I said, Dad was injured. I mean, so he drew a little pension from the $27 a month or that. But we had cotton, and they killed a hog every year, and that was our meat, and I hate meat now. I can't stand it. But, and we had chickens. We had our own eggs, and I can remember on Saturday, Mom would put me and Talmadge, and I'm gonna say just me and Talmadge because Gerald was the baby, and he got by with a lot of stuff that Talmadge and I didn't get by with. But anyway, we'd chase down a chicken, you know, grab an old hen, and Mama would cook it on Sunday for lunch. And back then, anybody could stop or come home with you for lunch, you know, and you always had green beans and potatoes and tomatoes and whatever, especially like in the summertime, and most of the time in the wintertime too, because they had it in cans, you know. I mean, they canned a lot. I mean, and but we walked everywhere we went. Nobody up here just about had cars, you know, a few people. Chester Shackles had a truck. And I can remember the day that my dad had a heart attack. I was having a heart attack. And we went down and got Chester to come up, and he carried Daddy over to Kitchen's Clinic in Lafayette. And I went with him, and I don't really know why Mama didn't go, except for Gerald was a little lived back, probably just 6 or 7 or 8 years old, I don't remember. But he stayed over at Kitchen's Clinic all day. And then late that afternoon, they decided to send him to Erlanger. And they gave him like a 50% chance to live, but he did. He came right on through that, you know. And
That's awesome. So you've kind of told me that you all helped with the chickens and
well,
a garden, I'm assuming.
well, a fat peddler came up through here too. It was, this guy was from Lafayette, and he had an old school bus that he had transformed into a rolling store, actually. Had shelves in it and had a chicken coop on the back, and you could trade chickens and eggs and butter. Mama used to, of course, we had cows and we churned the butter, you know, and he would take all that stuff. You know, I don't know how he kept his butter from melting, but anyway, but it came every Friday, and of course, every once in a while, Mom and Daddy would buy a loaf of bread, and that was a treat for us because you just didn't have that kind of stuff. I'm talking about in the 40s, and you know, and anyway, and the Hobbses, Jeanette Watson was a Hobbs, and she lived right across, right back in here, and she stayed at our house, or we stayed down there about as much as we did at our own houses, but for some reason they would have like vanilla wafers, and we never had vanilla wafers, and I can remember asking for a vanilla wafer one time, and when I got home, I suffered for it because I asked for it, you know. But anyway, that sounds like we had a bad childhood, but we didn't. We were happy. We, in our backyard, we had a big old apple tree, and we had grapevines that grew up in that apple tree, and we would sit up there. We'd climb that tree and sit up there for hours and eat those grapes. They were Concord grapes, sweet as honey, you know, just so sweet and good. And just, I mean, I really wouldn't, I don't think I'd trade my childhood.
Me either. That's awesome.
We learned hard work, though.
Yeah.
We learned to work.
Yeah. So what were some of the jobs that you and Talmadge and Gerald did?
Well, when I was real small, I can't remember, I'm sure that I had to help Mom in the house, but I've always been an outside person, and I'd rather go with my dad. You know, if he was going to walk down in the bottom to see about the cows, I'd rather been out walking with him. But my dad had stomach problems. My dad was like 45 years old when Talmadge was born. And then that would make him like 47 when I was born. And then Gerald was actually 4 years, so say he was older. He didn't really feel like playing with us or any of that kind of stuff, and he didn't feel like any foolishness actually from us. And he liked to go to bed early, so we went to bed early. Of course, we didn't have any reason to stay up late back in those days anyway.
That's a good thing.
But and we had just the lamps for lights, you know. And now when the power goes off and we light one of them, I think, oh gosh, I can't see nothing, you know. But we studied, we did our everything, and you know. But I guess back when you was little, your eyes were better. But anyway.
So how were you involved in church, school things, and the community center was pretty active back then?
Well, we had choir practice every Saturday night, and we had a pretty good group of young people back in those days. But this, I guess, was along the time I was probably in the 7th, 8th, 9th, or 10th grade. And there was not this clubhouse here, but the old clubhouse that was here before it burned. And they had square dances every Saturday night. Mostly Methodist, because the Baptists, they didn't believe in dancing, so we would get in trouble if we got off the bus on Saturday. We got in trouble if sometimes, the bus would stop, the church bus would stop and let off the kids whose parents would be here, so. But anyway, I did stop a time or two, but anyway.
Wasn't the normal activity, huh?
And as I can remember being, and they called it the card class when I was, probably 6 years old or so. And Miss Mamie Shankles was my teacher. That's about all I can remember about that far back. But then as I got older and I taught some of the classes, like the junior class, they called it the junior class back in those days. And actually, Talmadge and I were saved on the same, and I can't remember if your mom was saved that same night, but we were all baptized at the same time in Guthrie's Creek.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's, I can't remember who all was baptized besides your mom and Talmadge and I.
Wow.
But in school, even in 8th grade, we didn't have a gym, so we had basketball courts. The boys' basketball court was over on the west side, and the girls' basketball court was over here on the east side. And I actually played basketball in elementary school and also in high school. We were all short back in those days. We didn't have tall people. And I was actually the captain my senior year in basketball. But that's about the limit to the sports. Back in back in those days, we didn't have like softball, baseball, or that kind of stuff. They thought it was a waste of time. Really, you had farming to do. You didn't have time to do that kind of stuff.
When you went to town, what was that like? You mentioned that the store came out here, so where else might you shop?
Actually, Charles and I were dating, I guess, the first time that I really went to Chattanooga.
How old were
I
you?
can't remember I can remember going to Lafayette and to Chickamauga, but not to Chattanooga. And, but I guess when Charles and I were dating is the first time that
How old were you?
we ever went. And then, that was a long time ago too. And then my first job, I graduated in 56 in May, and I went to work at Chattanooga Paper in June of that year, and Demery helped me get that job. But anyway, and I worked there until, I guess, January of 60, and Terry was born in April of 60. So I worked on Main Street, and the salesman would come in, and the money that they had collected out on their routes, and we had a guy, one of the owners, Mr. Deal, he would make up a bank deposit. The banks were on Market Street, Market and Main, and there's a Pioneer on this corner, and you had to cross the street to Hamilton, or Chattanooga Paper banked in Hamilton. Seed Feed or Lorette Marina was on the way up there, and they delivered feed to like chicken houses and all that. And I was just out of high school, and they would send me to the bank, and they were thousands of dollars. So that tells you the difference in when it was back in those days and what it is now. You wouldn't get out with $10 up through there. Well, now they've started converting it over. In fact, Chattanooga Paper is a restaurant now,
Oh, is it?
and but we were pretty brave back in those days. I guess.
Different times. Yeah, you mentioned a little bit about the roads being paved. Do you remember when telephones came?
Not really. I know that were party lines. And I can't remember how many was on that party line, but if you picked it up, you had to put it back down. We always put it back down, but some people didn't. But some, you know, I really don't remember. Probably in the late 50s, early 60s, maybe.
I was in 11th grade, so you had already gone to work in town by then. That's why you don't remember.
Well, and two, our first house was down in Cassandra, right across the railroad track there, and they had paved roads, electricity, and telephones before we did up here. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. What was a special thing to you growing up? What was something that you got to do that was really special?
Well, I had mentioned that the oldest son, the oldest boy of the six brothers was Homer, and they lived in Chickamauga. And Millican worked for Dr. Osborne, the dentist in Chickamauga. And Evelyn was her older sister, and they would come to visit us pretty often. And if it was in the summertime and we weren't in school, they'd usually take one of us back home with them. And that was a treat because they would take us to Lake Winnepesaukah, and they would take us to a movie. And they didn't live that far from downtown, and Oklahoma would walk. He had 2 grandchildren, and he would walk us down the railroad track, and we'd walk to Chickamauga. And they always had all this good stuff like Cheerios and cornflakes and stuff like that, and that we always enjoyed, you know. And they'd have bananas, you know, and so anyway, we always enjoyed going to Uncle Homer's. I guess that was kind of the highlight of our but Talmadge and Gerald fished, you know. Chickamauga Creek starts up there, and it comes down through there, and it comes across. It came across our place. It comes across Talmadge's place now, and we would catch grasshoppers on the way down there onto the creek, and then they'd make me sit there and be quiet while they fished. But anyway, but we would. The way we took hay up was just loose hay. We would rake it in long windrows, and then go take a fork and put just shocks or little piles, you know, and then the wagon had a frame on it, and they would pick that loose hay up with a pitchfork and put it in that wagon. And of course, it was Talmadge and Daddy would throw that hay up there, and I never did weigh 100 pounds when I was growing up, but I had to pack that hay down, you know, and it would be all over us, and you know, itch, just terrible. And Daddy and Mama would let us go to the creek, and that's about the only time they ever let us go down there. I guess they sprayed wood ground or something, but anyway, we'd go to the creek after, and that was a treat, you know, when we.
Yeah, remember that too. I think you and Charles were youth group leaders when I was coming up as a teen. And I remember we had a Christmas program and we filmed Mary on the donkey coming down South Cedar Lane. Do you remember that?
No, I don't.
Yeah,
Wow.
that was a while ago. So we always had a Christmas play. Yeah.
I thought of something else that I thought it slipped on my mind too.
Did y'all have any questions?
Well, yeah, I've got a question. You said Jeanette lived back here by the creek where the, and then you talked about Patricia lived at Ray Bell's house?
Well,
Or is it a-
Patricia actually lived in Chattanooga, but she would come out every weekend to spend the weekend with her grandparents.
Okay, was this Patty?
John and Hattie Bell
Were
that
we
lived in the
friends?
big house.
Uh,
But their daughter, Faye, she was married to a Denton.
mhm.
But for some reason, Joe Denton, he just showed up every once in a while.
He's in the minutes of the community club, so
Well,
he is a real person.
He is a real person, and I can remember him.
I don't
But
remember.
she lived there.
So Jeanette would talk about her friend Patty. Is that the same Patricia you were talking about?
Yeah.
But she indicated that she lived in a house on this side of my property, on the south side, not where we built, where Ray Bell's house had been.
Chill Bell lived in that house that was on this side.
Okay,
And there was a store there, kind of where Tim's house was, you know.
uh-huh.
Demery, I think, actually owned that store, did that store, but I think Chill took care of it, and I was pretty young then. But he committed suicide. Don't record that.
Tim-
Block that out.
Tim told me that the building still there was the blacksmith shop, and the store was kind of across the road from it, the old road, not the new road.
The road was on the west side of the store. Is that what he's talking about?
The store was on this side of the road.
That's what I mean.
But
Yeah.
The road was on the west. The store was on the east.
The old road comes through my front yard.
Interesting.
Children.
That ditch, I don't, is that ditch still there? There was a big old ditch,
Mhm.
I think right behind the store.
There's a big ditch, like direct across from Deborah's house. There's some wood, some trees there, and then there's a big ditch,
Yeah.
and there's a culvert. So that Tim showed me where the road came
You
across,
said it.
and it's in my front yard. It's not
You're
where,
right.
where it is now.
Not long after that, it turned up the hill and went up toward
And
Betty's house.
actually, there was a hill that you went up
And then turned
before
back
the
again.
Beatties. You get up the Beatties, and then it turned kind of north.
Mm-hmm. It was an S thing going there.
The Pointer place. You don't remember before the Pointers got the place?
No.
Okay. I've racked my brain today to try to remember who owned that place before his grandmother. You know, his grandmother actually bought that place for
I didn't
him.
know that.
And it was like over $1 million, or about $1 million. And that's what we did too back in those days, because it was just unheard of for somebody to have $1 million, you know. But there was a wagon, that house that sits right there next to the road.
Mhm.
There was a wagon that always sat in there that said Bush, or whatever the Bush beer is, you know, it had that across there. And for some reason, and I don't know if I just thought this or that somebody that was connected with that owned that place then before
Could've been.
the Queeners. And I'm not really,
I kind of remember that wagon. You could see it from the road.
You
in
could,
that
it had
barn.
that on the side of the,
Mhm.
you know, it was like almost, it was like one of the wagons that the big Clydesdale horses pulled.
Well, that's a good research to do.
Like I said, we never had a car.
Mm.
And over where where Kim lives over there, back in behind their barns was where Uncle Freeman, my dad's brother, lived, you know. And we would, I guess it was on Sundays that we would walk over there. We would walk down this road to right there, I don't know, that trailer that's on the Beatty's, right below the Beatty's place there. It may be on the Beatty's. Anyway, right before you got to the Simmons house, we would go up, walk across that ridge and come out over on that Captain Woods Road almost to the creek. And we'd walk on over to Uncle Freeman's and we'd spend the day and then walk back before it got dark, you know. And I was little. I mean, I was young. I mean, I can remember that though. I can remember how tired I would get, you know, right? But there wasn't, I just had to keep on putting one foot for the other because I didn't have a choice, you know.
So, anybody else got a question?
The
What do you think?
sewing machine that Jenny's mom taught you to sew on, was it an old treadle sewing machine?
I'm not,
We didn't.
I
don't
don't-
remember.
I
her
don't
using
remember.
one.
I don't remember. But
Or was it by hand? Did you sew by hand?
I know we sewed by hand a lot,
Yeah.
but Jenny's mom had a sewing machine and that was quicker, you know. So, and it was always gathered skirts, you know, and she taught me how to measure, how to, you know, and if I had any buttonholes to sew, she made my buttonholes. So it must have been an electric machine
Okay.
or something because those old treadle, they may have a buttonhole to make buttonholes, but I don't know.
I don't know either.
Do you think anybody here still has an old treadle machine?
I have my grandparents.
You could bring it for display, Jenny.
We had a treadle machine that was my grandmother's, but when Talmadge and Peggy moved in with Mom, moved in our house up there, they got rid of a lot of the old stuff, and Talmadge has still got a lot of the old stuff, like the kitchen table and that kind of stuff, but we had pictures on our walls, big pictures with these big frames around them. That was my grandfather and my great-grandfather, and they took pictures of their kids when they were little. Talmadge and Peggy did, and put them in those, and I don't know what happened to the old pictures.
Oh, maybe Cindy has them.
Well, but you know, you really
think
don't
about
think. I mean, you know, and that's just old pictures, and
Yeah.
They might be behind.
It could be.
I don't know.
That's what I would do.
I don't even know if they, I don't know. But anyway,
Okay. Wow. See, you had plenty to say. Thank you so much.
I stumbled through it and I left out a whole lot of stuff, and
Well, listen, we're gonna,
Uncle Bert
go ahead.
went to Berry.
Oh, okay. So
And
somebody,
actually, he taught at Berry for a while, I think. And they all went to this log
Okay.
school that's up next to Mountain Cove.
Oak Hill.
Daddy and Uncle Bose and Uncle Bert and Uncle Mama all went to school up there. But this is when Uncle Bert went to Berry, and Martha Berry signed it. That's his
Oh, how
report card.
neat. Ooh, he was a good student.
Wow.
It don't have a date on it, does it?
Yeah, 1903.
Okay, on the back, there's another one, but that was before, or, that's probably, I don't know, it's not signed by the same person.
He
It's
was,
not signed by Martha Berry.
yeah, he was the principal. So I guess she had good helpers.
Yeah,
That is awesome.
that's cool.
what would the music be at the community club when they would do square dances? Would that be like a live band would play, or just people from around town, or
I don't really know who played.
you probably didn't get to go, did you?
No,
Yeah.
we were Baptists. We didn't
Yeah.
go to it.
Exactly.
That's crazy.
interesting.
Oh, but that's the way it was.
Yeah, no, yeah.
I don't remember going to square dances, but we did have a lot of live bands,
Yeah.
and Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs was the famous one that came here. And I don't know if people square danced when they played or not, but that type, Grand Ole Opry was
Yeah.
really, that was big,
Yeah,
so
that's the time
that
for
type
it.
music.
Did you know that Johnny Cash
Oh, in
came
Lafayette.
to Lafayette?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, know all about that one.
I've
Did
got,
y'all do singing though? Did y'all sing songs here? I thought
Did you say
No.
choir practice?
you did.
choir
Yeah.
practice was at church, but, no, I don't remember groups of singing or anything like that here.
No.
Interesting.
But you know, as kids, we had vacation Bible school. Cedar Grove had vacation Bible school. And revivals were the same way. And everybody
Just
went,
read it all
you
in.
know, they went here and there wasn't any friction between us, just that the Baptists didn't believe in dancing. So we didn't get to dance.
Well, thank you very, very, very much.
I
And,
have
we are